Hello and welcome back to Math with Mrs. Becker. Today in pre-calculus, we are going to finish up section 3.3 by looking at what's called the x-intercept form of a quadratic. The x-intercept form, it is the most useful form if you want to find the x-intercepts. Now remember, an x-intercept is the location where your graph is going to cross the x-axis. So that's what this form really helps you to do quickly. Okay, so it says the x-intercepts are s and t. But what you want to notice is that in the formula, it's a minus, okay? So it's whatever you're subtracting from x in the parentheses, that's an x-intercept. Whatever you're subtracting from x in the parentheses, that's your x-intercept. So it's going to be opposite of what it appears. If it's a minus sign, the intercept value will be positive. If it's a plus, it's because you put a negative in there. Minus a negative made it the plus, so your intercept value is going to be a negative, okay? Your y-intercept, remember, your y-intercept is where your graph crosses the y-axis. So at that location, x equals 0, okay? So you'll just go ahead, fill a 0 into the equation, and solve it. Now, if you want to find your vertex, remember your vertex is the center point. If your parabola opens upwards, your vertex is at the bottom. It's called a minimum. If your parabola opens downwards, the vertex is at the top. It's called a maximum. In order to find the x value, you take s plus t and you divide it by 2. So you're taking your two x-intercepts, add them together, divide by 2. That's the x. Then you fill the x value into the original function to find the y. Okay, let's go ahead and we will do 2 of these, and I'll try to go slow just to make sure it all makes sense. If I want to graph this quadratic function, this is an x-intercept form. Still, I like to go ahead and figure out what is a, because that helps me know ahead of time, is the parabola going to open upwards or is it going to open downwards? A is the value out front, so it's -1/2. If your a value is negative, that means that your parabola is opening downwards. Okay, so I know that right away. If I look at this, s equals whatever you're subtracting from x, so in this case it's a 4. X equals whatever, this is a t, sorry, whatever you're subtracting from x, well, this is really x minus a -2. That's how it became a plus. So what you're subtracting is a -2. So when I go to find the vertex, they told us to find the vertex, you take s plus t and divide it by 2. So s is 4 plus t is -2, and you divide it by 2. Positive 4 plus -2 is positive 2 over 2. So x equals a 1. So my vertex, x is a 1. To find the y value, you go ahead and plug the x value back in. So I have -1/2 times, if I plug a 1 in, 1 minus 4 is -3. If I plug a 1 in, 1 plus 2 is 3. So when I go ahead and calculate this, that's what y is going to be, you guys. So I have -1/2 times -3 times +3. That is 4.5. So I have a vertex at 1 and 4.5. If I want to find the x-intercepts, your x-intercepts are s and t. But because they're your x-intercepts, you just state them as x equals. So x equals 4, x equals -2. There's your x-intercepts. Again, it's whatever you're subtracting from x in the parentheses. It is those values. If I want to know my y-intercept, that occurs where x equals 0. So I know the x value is a 0. To find the y value, I just fill a 0 in. So it's -1/2. 0 minus 4 is -4. 0 plus 2 is 2. So when I go ahead and calculate that, -0.5 times -4 times +2, I get +4. So my y-intercept is at 0, 4. That's everything. I know that the graph is going to open downwards. I know the center point. I know where it crosses the x-intercepts. I know, or the x-axis. I know where it crosses the y-axis. So let's go ahead and graph it. If I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in each direction, that's enough to show the whole graph. Okay, so my vertex, if I go to the right 1 and up 4.5, that is the maximum because the graph is opening down. That's as high as this parabola is going to go. My x-intercepts, these are the values where it touches the x-axis. If I go to the right 4, there's a point, and if I go to the left 2, there's a point. Now your y-intercept, where does it touch the y-axis? You stay at 0, go up 1, 2, 3, 4, there's your point. Now all I do is connect all of those points. Notice, yes, the parabola is opening downwards, which is what we determined at the beginning when we identified A. That is it, okay? One more time, just because I know it's a lot, okay? Let's do one more. Even though they do not ask for A, I do think it's important to always identify that right away. A is the value out front. It is -2. The reason why this is so important, -2, because it's a negative value for A, that tells me ahead of time that my parabola has to open down. If A has a positive value, then your parabola opens up, okay? If I look at this, I like to go ahead in this format and right away just say, okay, what is S and T? S is whatever you are subtracting from X in the first set of parentheses, it's a 3. T is whatever you are subtracting from X in the second set of parentheses. Because this is a plus, that means I'm minusing a negative, so T is a -1. Now when I go to try and find a vertex, your vertex, it says to find the X. You take S plus T and you divide it by 2. So X equals S3 plus T -1 divided by 2. +3 plus -1 is +2 over 2 is 1. So my vertex, the x value is a 1. To find the y value, you have to change the x's to 1 in the original function. So -2 is out front. 1 minus 3 is -2 times 1 plus 1 is +2. If I go ahead and calculate that, -2 times -2 times +2, it's 8. So the vertex is at 1, 8. This vertex is going to be a maximum point because the parabola is opening downward, so this is the top point. To find your x-intercepts, this is your x-intercept form. All you have to do is state your value for S and T, but just say that it's x equals. So x equals 3 and x equals -1. You're done. It's whatever you're subtracting from x here, whatever you're subtracting from x there. Now your y-intercept. Your y-intercept is the location where x is a 0. So in order to find y, we go back to the original and we change the x's to 0. So -2 is out front. 0 minus 3 is -3. 0 plus 1 is 1. If I go ahead and calculate this, -2 times -3 is a +6. 6 times 1 is 6. So your y-intercept is at 6. This is enough where we can go ahead and graph this, you guys. If I go to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's enough. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I go up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I do have to go up 8 because notice where the vertex is. And I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so my vertex, and in this case, again, it's a maximum. I go to the right one, up 8. That is the highest point on the graph. My x-intercepts, this is the points, these are the points on the x-axis. This is +3, so I go to the right 3. This is -1, so I go to the left 1. Your y-intercept, this is where the graph is going to cross the y-axis. So I stay at 0, go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There, that's enough points. When I go ahead and connect these, I can definitely see the parabola. At the beginning, we said because A had a negative value, the parabola should open down, and it did. So that is the third and final form that you can write a quadratic. Okay, remember we looked at that transformation form and the polynomial form at the beginning of the section. This is the last one. It's called the x-intercept form. Now here's where it gets a little bit tricky, you guys. There are times where it's necessary to change a quadratic function from one form to another. So that means maybe you have it in polynomial form and you want it in transformation form. Or maybe you have in transformation form and you want it in x-intercept form. So it's important that you can go from one form to the other. So let's go ahead and just review what those formats are. If you have polynomial form, that's where it's ax squared plus bx plus c. This is super helpful if you are trying to find zeros because you can set it equal to 0, you can factor it, you can use the quadratic formula when it's in that format. Okay, let's look at transformation form. Transformation, also known as the vertex form. That is ax minus h squared plus k. The reason why it's called the transformation form is because you can identify what transformations occurred from the parent function. A value out front tells you if you had a vertical stretch or compression. Adding or subtracting in parentheses tells you if your parabola moved left or right. Adding or subtracting at the end tells you if your parabola moved up or down. Now today, we looked at the x-intercept form, which is ax minus s, x minus t. So these are the formats. Okay, now here are just some guidelines. If you are changing transformation or x-intercept into polynomial form, you distribute and combine like terms. So you know what, rather than even just going in order, let's go ahead and try to find any of them where we have to go into polynomial form. That is ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, number 1, change to polynomial form, and number 3, change to polynomial form. So let's go ahead and do those. Okay, so what I need to do is expand this. Order of operations, I would do the exponent before you could multiply or before you could add. So my 0.4 has to stay. When you have a power of 2 on a binomial, what that means is that you have that group 2 times. So this is what I really have. I have a 0.4 out front. My x minus 3 to the power of 2 means that I write this twice and then I have the plus 2. So I have to multiply these together first because it's still dealing with the exponent, which would be the first thing to address using the order of operations. So 0.4. X times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Negative 3x combined with a negative 3x gives me negative 6x if you combine those like terms. Last, negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. So that's what I have at this point. Again, we are just simply following the order of operations. We multiply before we add. So I need to go ahead and distribute a decimal. I have 0.4. 0.4 times x squared is 0.4x squared minus 0.4 times 6 is 2.4x plus 0.4 times 9 is 3.6. We have the plus 2 at the end. Our final answer in polynomial form, you just have to make sure you combine like terms and have everything in the correct order. So it would be 0.4x squared minus 2.4x plus 3.6 plus 2 is 5.6. That is going from transformation form to polynomial form. Okay, this one, they're starting us off with x-intercept form, and again, they want us to end in polynomial form. So it's order of operations. This is all multiplying. Remember, because of that commutative property of multiplication, you can multiply in any order. So I could go ahead and distribute the negative 2 first. So I would have negative 2x, negative 2 times negative 4 would be positive 8. I would still have the x plus 2. Now I can FOIL this because it's 2 terms by 2 terms. Negative 2x times x is negative 2x squared. Negative 2x times 2 is negative 4x. Positive 8 times x is positive 8x. Positive 8 times 2 is 16. Combine the like terms. Make sure that you put it in the correct order. So my negative 2x squared comes first. Negative 4x plus 8x is a positive 4x plus 16. So this was going from x-intercept form into polynomial form. For me, I like going into polynomial form the best because it's a lot of skills that we work on all the time. we do foiling and we do distributing and we combine like terms and we put things in standard form. Okay, so when it's asking you to go to that polynomial form, those ones, at least my gut instinct is that you're going to have absolutely no problem. You're just going to go for it. Okay, now this one though, they want us to go to x-intercept form. So they want it to look like this at the end. So it says to change either polynomial form or transformation form. Okay, so this is polynomial form. If we want to change it to x-intercept form, factor out the leading coefficient. Remember, the leading coefficient is the number in the front. So that's the first thing that I'm going to do because that's the first thing it tells us. So the 3 has to come out front. The 3 cancels the 3, so I have x squared. Minus sign. 3.9 divided by 3 is 1.3x. Minus sign. 43.2 divided by 3 is 14.4. Okay, so that's step 1. To change something to x-intercept form, factor out the leading coefficient. Then factor or use the quadratic formula to find the x-intercepts. So if I look, can you think of two numbers that multiply to 14.4 and add to a, multiply to a negative 14.4 and add to a negative 1.3? When it starts getting into decimals, I don't even want to try to factor it. So immediately I just say, okay, we have two options. You can factor or you can do the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula, we're only taking what's inside of the parentheses because we factored out that 3. Okay, so right now we're not looking at it at all. A is the number in front of the squared term. It's a 1. B is a number in front of x, negative 1.3. C is a number at the end, negative 14.4. Quadratic, b squared minus 4 times a times c. So when I go ahead and calculate that, negative 1.3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 14.4. I got 59.29. Okay, this is the value that goes underneath the radical. So x equals negative b. B is already a negative. Negative of a negative makes it a positive 1.3. Plus or minus the square root. B squared minus 4ac is 59.29 all over 2 times a. A is a 1. 2 times 1 is 2. Your next step, we want to calculate and find out what is the square root of 59.29. So x equals 1.3 plus or minus. If I take the square root of 59.29, I have 7.7 divided by 2. So here are your x-intercepts. All you're going to do first is calculate the top. So if I go 1.3 plus 7.7, hit enter, then divide that by 2. So one intercept is at 4.5. The other one is what you get when you subtract. So 1.3 minus 7.7, hit enter, divided by 2, it's negative 3.2. Okay, so what happens here is now we go ahead and we can write it in x-intercept form. Your 3 goes out front. Then it's x minus whatever your intercepts are. Here are my intercepts. So it's x minus 4.5 and x minus a negative. If I minus a negative, this will become a plus 3.2. So to go to x-intercept form, step 1, divide out the leading coefficient. Step 2, find the intercepts, whether you do that by factoring or doing the quadratic formula. Then to write the equation at the end, it's x minus whatever these intercepts are. Okay, last one. Now for me, this one is a little bit trickier because you have to remember how to complete the square. Remember, completing the square is finding that magic number. It is b divided by 2 and square it. Now this has come up a couple times during this course so far, but here is yet another time where it's going to kind of shake things up a little bit, okay? So if you are changing to transformation form, this is what we want, okay? We want a value up front, a binomial squared, and possibly a value at the end, okay? If we're changing it to transformation form, it may be necessary to complete the square. So the first thing that I do is I go ahead, and for me, everything is easier, at least this one, if I'm going to transformation form, I like to start in polynomial form, okay? I just think that it's going to make a lot more sense. So I go ahead and I FOIL these two. So 0.3, x times x is x squared. X times 1 is 1x. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. If I combine the like terms, 0.3, I'd have x squared. 1x minus 2x is a negative x minus 2. Distribute 0.3x squared minus 0.3x minus, if I take 0.3 times 2, I get 0.6. Okay, now this is polynomial form. If I am going into transformation form, this is that whole completing the square thing. Remember, when you complete the square, you put parentheses around the x terms, you leave the number out. Now, before you can find the magic number, you need to divide the leading coefficient out of just the terms that contain an x. So I would take that 0.3 back out. This would give me x squared minus x in parentheses minus my 0.6. You only take the 0.3 out of the parentheses. Now what I want to do is figure out what can I add in the parentheses so that way I could factor this. So the formula again is b divided by 2 and square it. B is the number in front of your single variable. In this case, it's a negative 1. If I take negative 1 and I divide it by 2 and square it, negative 1 squared is 1 over 2 squared is 4. Now notice we're already dealing with decimals, so if you are more comfortable with my 1/4 being 0.25, that is totally fine. So what this tells us is I can add 0.5 into the parentheses, and I will be able to factor it. So add 0.25, but I have to keep everything even. So remember, you can't, this is a 0.6. I can't just add 0.25 here. So whatever I add here, I need to subtract on the outside, but this 0.3 goes to the 0.25. So I multiply them. 0.3 times 0.25 is 0.075. So that's technically what I added here. So in order to balance, I need to minus it on the outside. Now here's your last step. 0.3. When you complete the square, and this was a trick that I taught you in Algebra 2. Okay, when you complete the square, what the value is going to be is whatever was inside the parentheses before you squared it. So in this case, it's going to be x, and this is a negative 1/2, so minus 0.5 squared. Now if I combine these two, negative 0.6 minus 0.075, it is negative 0.675. Okay, so again, when you go to factor, if your magic number is a fraction, like it was here, it was 1/4, okay? Yes, we wrote it as a decimal, but it's the same thing. When we found the magic number, we ended up with a fraction. When you factor, what you're going to put inside the parentheses with x, 100% of the time, is whatever you had in the parentheses prior to squaring. And just to show you that, so here we're looking for two numbers that multiply to 1/4 and add to a negative 1. If I take negative 1/2 times negative 1/2, negative times a negative is a positive. Top times top is 1, bottom times bottom is 4. So they multiply to that. If I add them, negative 1/2 plus negative 1/2, my common denominator is a 2. Negative 1 plus negative 1 is a negative 2. Negative 2 over 2 is a negative 1. So just showing you that this works, okay? Let's do another one, because in my opinion, and maybe you totally disagree, but for me, I think this is the most challenging. So I wanted to make sure we ended today, so this was the most fresh thing in your mind, okay? If I'm changing to transformation form, for me, it's going to be a lot easier if you turn it to polynomial form first. So the first thing I do is I go ahead and I expand this. X times x is x squared. X times 2 is 2x. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Combine the like terms. So I have 0.2 times x squared minus x minus 6. Now I distribute that 0.2. So I have 0.2x squared minus 0.2x. If I take negative 6 times 0.2, I have negative 1.2. Now this is polynomial form. In order to go into transformation form from this format, you put parentheses around the terms that have an x. Before you find the magic number, you divide out the leading coefficient. So I take the 0.2 out of only the two terms that are in the parentheses. So I'd have x squared minus just an x, because the 0.2 came out, minus 1.2. This did not change. Now that I have a 1 in front of x squared, you find the magic number. It is b divided by 2 when you square it. B is the number in front of x. In this case, again, it's a negative 1. So negative 1 divided by 2, square it. Negative 1 squared is 1. 2 squared is 4. So again, I had 1/4 because I'm dealing with decimals. Go ahead and use the decimal. This means that I can add this into the parentheses and I'll be able to factor it. So it's 0.2 x squared minus x plus the magic number, which is 1/4. I still have my minus 1.2. Now you can't just add something here. You have to keep it balanced. So whatever I add here, I need to minus to the outside. This 0.2 goes to whatever's in the parentheses. So I take 0.2 times my 0.25 and I get 0.05. That's what I have to minus at the end. Because when I put in the 0.25 here, I actually added 0.05 to the problem. You have to balance it by subtracting it outside. Now your final answer, 0.2 is out front. This is positive, so your A is a positive, so the parabola would open upwards. I have to factor this. Okay, what if you had your magic number as a fraction or we wrote it in decimal form? When you factor it, it will always be whatever was inside of the parentheses before you squared it. So it's negative 1/2. So it's x minus 0.5. That's what's squared inside of the parentheses. Now, if I go ahead and combine the like terms, negative 1.2 minus 0.05 is negative 1.25. This is transformation form. So you guys, we just finished 3.3. There are some book questions that I want you to try. Now keep in mind, they're not all going to be crazy challenging like these. Okay, this is kind of the harder part of the section. We did start off by graphing an x-intercept form. Okay, so these questions are going to focus on both of those skills. There is a quick quiz. Keep in mind, book assignments, what I'm looking for is effort. Are you trying every question? Are you showing work? Are you trying to get comfortable with the skills? Okay, the quick quiz is where I grade it on, is it accurate? Did you get all of the values correct? Okay, so as you're doing this, this is good practice to become comfortable. This is graded on accuracy. This is graded on completion. All right, I hope you guys had a great time today, and I'll talk to you soon.